now my connection is going to go from all this cool conversation to one of the most exciting templates inside Consolidated CDA, where we're seeing so much excitement these days, social history.
Let's do.
And the value set group was meeting on a specific issue. I'm going to see if I can take over the screen and get rid of our peanut butter and jelly sandwich for a second.
Look what he has.
Before you do that, here's my English muffins with the peanut butter and the jam.
There you go.
There you go. Peanut butter edge to edge, lots of jam.
Okay, like a croissant. I like it.
But when do we get to know the statistics on the peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Did we do a poll?
We'll announce them when we get right back. I think Natasha has totals for all of that. Yeah.
I didn't do the poll.
Want to know. All right. So let's see if I can bring up this amazing new tool for viewing Consolidated CDA online. If anybody hasn't heard about this yet, we'll be talking about it a little bit later on today. But I wanted to bring it up to look at the social history section, and more specifically inside the social history section, there is a social history observation entry template that's used to record social history observations that are written up in the social history section. So at this template right here, you can see all of the constraints very nicely laid out. Every piece of the XML structure for this observation is nicely laid out right here. Very, very kind of sweet thing. I have to give John DeMore due credit for thinking this up. This is what John was doing over Christmas break this year. He gave us a wonderful gift. It is tied, if you click on this View PDF, back to the old stuff that we all know and love. So if you're feeling like you need your pot roast with the ends cut off, here's the old way of doing it, and it's just parceled down so you get 3 or 4 pages right here that specifically are focused on the same template that I'm looking at, in case you're wondering and you want to check if it's exactly the same. These constraints that you see here on the template are exactly the same as the ones that you see here on screen. So these observations get further semantically clarified by populating something in this code element that tells us more than just it's an observation. It's telling us something more specific about what kind of observation it is. And we have this constraint statement right here that says that this code should be selected from a value set called social history type. I'll show you more about that in a second. It's a dynamic binding, which means that as new versions of this value set get born, we can attach and use those without any special requirements. If it had been static binding, then we would have had to explicitly adopt newer versions of the value set, but this will dynamically absorb newer versions of the value set. And then it says that if the code system for the code that you're using from this value set, which you should be using but you may not be using, but if you have populated your code with a code system that is not LOINC, then you shall contain at least one translation which should be selected from LOINC. This is a lot of gobbledygook, this mixture of shoulds and shalls. You know, here's a should that you don't even have to follow, but if you can, we'll go look at this value set. I'm going to click on this, and this will automatically take me into what's called the NLM's VSAC. VSAC is a public tool that anybody can get access to if you have a UMLS license. It also does some nice stuff to let you log in using your Microsoft account or your Google account to make things a little bit easier. But when you get in here, once you're logged in, then this link should, without too much trouble, take you straight into the, not linking me there directly. Let me do a quick search on this OID. I thought it would have dropped me down specifically on that one, but if not, you can easily query for a value set by name or by OID. We'll do a search, and we see here's the social history type value set. And here are the concepts.
What was on the previous page there, Lisa? The other tab you got up?
I tried to bounce.
No.
Tried to bounce straight to here.
What brought up there?
It just. Oh, it did bring me. It did bring me to it. I thought
it was loading slow, I think, from VSAC. Okay, because I was like, it should go directly to it.
It should go directly there. All right, so I'll close that one, and I'll just stick on this one. So this brings up the value set. There are 14 concepts that you should use, coded in SNOMED, and you can see environmental risk factors, educational achievement, health-related behavior, tobacco use, exercise, household, family, and support, details of drug misuse behavior, nutritional observations, employment details, community resource details, transportation details, toxic exposure status, housing history, and dose of radiation. So these are all concepts that have been picked out from the observable entity hierarchy within SNOMED. This is a hierarchy in SNOMED that receives very little, I'll tell you, almost no attention whatsoever. Thousands of new SNOMED codes are established every year. I think 34 observable entries, observable entity codes have been added to SNOMED in the past few years. It is not an area that SNOMED has been continuing to focus on ever since when meaningful use got started, and there were agreements made with different code systems on what their core competencies were, what their focus was, and observable entity went to Regent's-Street. And the LOINC code system is really where growth and expansion has occurred around observable entities. But somehow we historically have ended up with a should recommendation in here, not that you have to listen to it, which is why I think this conditional statement of if the code system is not LOINC, like if you ignored this and instead picked out concepts from LOINC, then you're more, I think, aligned with how the industry is really aiming to use these code systems. But you need to add a translation, and there's no guidance about a value set at all. They just sort of drop you off at the face of the earth, at the edge of this code system, and say, make sure that you've got a translation in there that takes you to LOINC. Those of us who were around when Consolidated CDA Release 1.1 was replaced by Consolidated CDA Release 2.0, we have institutional recollection of there being a mistake or a sidestep that got overturned. Consolidated CDA Release 2.0 didn't live very long. It was replaced within 6 months or less by 2.1 with a bunch of improvements and changes from the implementer community pushing up that things needed to be modified. And when we released 2.1, there were some tough spots that guidance had to be soft-stepped over in order for these two things to fit together. And I think that this weird conformance statement is left over from that historical point in time, and we don't think it makes any sense. There's lots of things that our current day selves know is not good about this conformance statement 8558 and 32951. But before we get in here and start attempting to fix it, we wanted to know from the implementer community, how are you guys dealing with this right now? What do you actually do in practice? and what could we learn from that, so that if we did want to make this better, we could make something better that's aligned with what implementers are actually wanting and doing. Anybody, I don't know, who's out there? Rochelle, John DeMoore, what are you guys seeing? How are people dealing with this today, this crazy guidance?
I mean, for DHIT, probably I can speak. We try to, apply all the rules that, you have described here, like from moot codes to, like all the extensions and everything. I am not sure, like when they have the translation is becoming a little problematic for the EHRs, because we usually like ask them if they have, and to be honest with you, I can't remember, and I will check right now if like every EHR that we collect the translation, because here you have it at least one translation. So I have to probably go back and then check what currently we are doing, and then probably come back to you.
That would be great, Oslam. Thanks. Anybody else have experience off the top of your head?
Yeah, I can't speak to the translations. I don't remember seeing a lot of them off the top of my head, but obviously looking at the conformance, they shall be there. So I'd have to go take a peek like Oslam to come back with a specific one for it. But I do know that people are having a lot of trouble with that value set. And I'll throw out one example, is people want to document something like caffeine intake. Actually, for a lot of patients who have arrhythmias and have heart issues, knowing caffeine consumption is important. And it's being documented. We're often getting it, but they're having trouble because I think in that value set you had up, you'd have to bring it back up on the screen, but I think they're choosing like a nutrition observation, which is obviously a lot less specific than caffeine, right? And they want to get across that more granular detail, but they're not. I don't think there's anything on that value set for caffeine, right?
Right. So what
Same with
I
like
see,
vitamin
John,
intakes.
is that people just ignore this should, and this is the crazy thing about it, because you're an insider, so you know that some shoulds should just be ignored. So what I see mostly is that this should just gets ignored. Nobody puts anything in SNOMED, and then you have a whole bunch of completely unknown LOINC codes that are going to be used because there's no value set. They have full reign of using anything that's in LOINC. So this is even the example that goes out with Consolidated CDA Release 2.1. This is the one example file, a C-CD. They just ignore that.
No. Well, that's not. I think that's the smoking status. You got to go down to the next one, or one of the ones with the social history observation, because that one's
tobacco use. Okay, social history. So let's see. But see, they just ignore it. Here's an explicit social history observation, and they just pick a LOINC code.
But that's technically acceptable because it says if the code system is not LOINC, then put the translation. This doesn't need the translation because the code is LOINC. Yeah.
It meets the letter of the law. We're in the value set work this year. We're like, why do we even include this value set in our work anymore?
Yeah,
what would it take to get rid of it?
I would say getting rid of it wouldn't have a lot of downside, personal opinion, but I would say actually it is getting used sometimes, just so you know, Lisa. That was actually the problem, is that we had some EHRs that were selecting from that value set, and that value set wasn't granular enough for actually what they were trying to impart.
How about if we make a grouping value set that keeps these old ones around, so that if there were for somebody who was using these, they'd still be able to, and then we go forward and create a new partition to go into the grouping value set that has LOINC concepts, and we do some call for LOINC concepts that are social history observation concepts from LOINC, and we put that in the other member value set and group them together, and then fix this conformance to be tighter.
I think that's a great idea, but I'm open to other people's thoughts on it.
I'm looking for negative,
I like that
what's
idea,
the downside
Lisa.
of it? Yeah.
Yeah, this is Dennis. I like that idea. I find like even when I was coding like in optometry and ophthalmology, SNOMED codes are not really prevalent. So in a lot of cases, they were putting like bad SNOMED codes and they weren't putting the translation. I'm very keen on making sure that those translations and that are put in properly, because sometimes you can't put, there isn't a SNOMED code for every ICD-10, the SNOMED to ICD-10 mapping. And so optometrists, they think an ICD-9 and even 10 was a challenge for them. And they definitely don't understand or think anything about SNOMED. So having those translations, I think, is key. How you're going to use it, and even the value sets, like we've started to adopt the value sets, like when you're doing the HL7 value sets for, say, like, sex or gender or gender identity, or some of the things like for validation purposes, trying to use the right code systems and the right value sets can be very, very exclusive, and will take a lot of that validation issue away if you can do that. But yeah, I haven't seen a lot of use cases where the value sets are used in the C-CDA, but translations for sure, we do that all over the place.
Okay. So we'll document this, but I need somebody to volunteer to help me. And David, I heard your voice. One of the challenges is when you try to move from a situation where you're just pointing at a code system to creating a value set, you need to be able to do an outreach to the community to find out what should be the starter concepts to put in this value set. So who could volunteer to look at the data that you have access to and produce a list for me of commonly used LOINC codes for populating social history observations? Who can do that?
Gravity's got those value sets laid out already.
Yep, they got the Gravity community. I have them on my hit list already. But like could Sequoia, John DeMore, could your organization, or Rochelle, your organization, look at records that you have access to say, here's the 25 or the 35 codes, LOINC codes that we tend to see used in social history observations today.
I'm going to try and get you a sample right now, Lisa. So.
Okay.
Right, and ours, we're giving them that we're creating the C-CDA for the majority of the ones we have data for, so it would be what we're using. I would imagine Özlem can speak to that, but we can probably look at what's being done for data we receive for portals, for sure.
That would be great. So,
it can be limited though, since we leave their data on their server, we don't carry on to ours, but we will do our best what we have.
Okay, thanks. And it'll be thrown in with everybody else, so we appreciate that. And I heard David Riddle's voice, I think. Dave, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I guess just further clarification on the conformance statement itself. So if the code is null flavor, is there still a requirement to include a translation in LOINC?
Well, I would say yes, because if the code system, there's a code system that goes along with the null flavor code, and the code system for null flavor is not LOINC.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a document that has null flavor equals UNK on the code, no translations, and just a pointer to narrative text in the original text. And I was curious if that was non-conformant or not. It sounds like it
that
is.
Would be, we'd have to run that through a good validator, but I think that's non-conformant. Okay,
Thanks.
I'm going to watch the clock. I think, John, I need to turn the control back over to you, but thank you very much. And anybody else who has either assumptions in your own system of what LOINC codes you're using for social history observations, I would very much like to improve this constraint this year and get us pointed to a grouping value set that will make more sense and something that we can grow into over time, because there's a tremendous amount of activity going on in this area. I think this is going to be a very important observation to us going forward. John, I will turn it back over to you.
Lisa, is it the LOINC part that we're still going to keep the the SNOMED part, right?
In the grouping value set, it will have two member value sets. One member value set will be the old SNOMED, sort of think of it as like it's like stubbed in, like grandfathered in, so that it's backwards compatible. And then there'll be a new value set that's never existed that will have all the LOINC codes that you guys gather up for me. And the conformance will be that you have to use a code that comes from that grouping value set.
And there will be no synonyms, right?
And there would be no translation.
Well, in the value set, we wouldn't have synonyms.
No, if I am not, that grouping value sets do not guarantee that. So there could be a concept in the SNOMED list right now which has a corresponding LOINC member that would be considered a synonym.
Because I think that's what the translation was used for, as a synonym. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's not so much to be synonyms. I think that there is an old, long-standing debate over whether you should be using SNOMED in the code or not of a observation, and I think this wrinkle is left over from old guidance around feeling like only LOINC could be used in the code.
All right.